Welcome to my show. I'm a guest here. Her name is Judith Kalunzi. Mrs. Judith, how are you doing, ma?
I am very well, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma. Firstly, you are a lawyer. You are also a meditator for divorces. You are a journalist and a public speaker. Can you please, ma, discuss more about yourself and how you're doing currently now, ma?
Well, I was a lawyer for 43 years, and it was just before the pandemic that I decided to not practice um, marriage litigation or mediation anymore. And so that's when I wrote my book, The Marriage License Handbook. Of course, I still have all the knowledge of what I did as a lawyer.
Hmm.
For about the first half of my career, I mostly did family law. At the very beginning, I did a little bit of criminal law and some civil rights. But the civil rights a sole practitioner just can't do. You need a big firm. But then I just got a lot of calls, especially from women. That was in the 70s, and women were looking for women lawyers for their family law. So, but the marriage license handbook was inspired by Michael Pollan, actually, in his book, The Omnivore's Dilemma. And that was a book, 4 chapters on 4 different meals, starting with fast food. And the last chapter was about 100% natural meal. And for that, he decided to, in Northern California, you could do this, shoot a wild boar for the entree. So to get a hunting license, he had to take a 14-hour class and take 100-question quiz to get his license. And I thought, let's see, to get a driver's license, you have to study the little book, you take a road test, an eye test, a written test. To get a marriage license, eh, it's where were your mother and father born and give me $56. So I thought I would write the marriage license handbook. And my book is a nice little size, just um, like a like a motor vehicle driver's license handbook. So I could call it Rules of the Road for Getting Married. Marriage basically is a contract. And to get a license, you really don't need anything but to pay the money and fill out the form, which doesn't ask much, but where were your mother and father born? In California, when you get a marriage license, you can also agree upon a married name. So this is a legal way to change your name if you would like to. So that would be the new name would be part of your marriage license application. And also in California, they give you a one-sheet information sheet about getting tested for diseases and also about domestic violence. And that's it. So now we have my book that tells you a lot more.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Mrs. Judith. And I also like to know, I would like you to discuss more on your marriage license and book, and also I think your upcoming book, which is The American Way of Divorce. That is a fraud on families, man.
Yes, yes. Well, the marriage license handbook, it not only talks about what the marriage contract is all about, and it's really um, an obligation. You take on an obligation of fidelity to your partner, and also a fiduciary obligation. And fiduciary obligation means highest good faith and fair dealing, especially when it comes to financial matters. You you um, you are obliged to deal fairly with your partner when it comes to money. I want to emphasize that marriage being a contract, the states have default contracts of what your marriage includes. And there are about 17 states that the default contract says that everything you acquire during marriage is community property or joint marital property. You can change the official rules of a state. You can write your own contract instead of going by the state contract. And there's another thing that most people don't know uh, is that you can write a contract to change the official or the default rules after marriage. When I was doing divorces, there was a woman came to me that had a business that she established, and she was a thriving business for 11 years. She told me that when she started her business, she talked to a lawyer because she wanted it to be her separate property. And the lawyer told her, oh, no, it has to be community property. That was not true. She and her husband could have done an agreement in writing to say that her business would be her separate property. So there was another example of a reason for a premarital agreement that I mediated for a young couple. The wife was living with her parents, and she was paying the mortgage as rent and paying it from her earnings. So the couple was going to continue, both of them living with the wife's parents, and but wife and husband to be agreed that they wanted the house to remain the property of her parents. Now, under California law, if payments had been made on the mortgage with wife's earnings, it would have had a community property interest develop in the house. So we wrote a premarital agreement that said her earnings were her separate property and that any payments made on the mortgage would remain the separate property of the wife's parents. So they were very agreeable on that, and we put it in writing, and that changed the default California law. So you could do it before or after marriage.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Mrs. Judith. And what do you think are also the basic steps that are involved in obtaining a marriage license, ma?
Well, it's contacting your county clerk or whatever county you might live in.
Okay.
During the pandemic, all marriage license applications were done online. But it's just you basically you both in well, I know for sure California law. Each state has their laws, but they're generally the same or similar. You need to appear together. The couple that wants to be married has to go together to the clerk's office or together online if your county does it only online, and fill out the paperwork, which is basically just your name and address. And in my county, they ask where your parents were born, and then what name do you want to have, and then you pay the fee. Currently, in my county, it's $56. And then you take the license to your actual marriage is done by an officiant, the officiant of the marriage. Many people use their church for their weddings. So the minister or the priest is the officiant.
Hmm. I really, really learned from that. Thank you so much, Mrs. Judith. And definitely, there will, from your experience too, there will also be some common mistakes some people have done when obtaining this licensing. Ma. What do you think are some common mistake couple make when trying to apply for this marriage license, ma?
Well, I don't think you can make mistakes in applying for the marriage license. I'd like to talk about things to think about in writing your own premarital agreement, or as people call it, prenup. It's not necessarily all. It's not all about money. There are a lot of things to think about. You need to think about having a budget. Are you going to have a budget? If both people are working, and these days mostly that happens, what will you do with your earnings? Some people like to have an agreement that says their earnings are separate property. So each one then has a bank account, and then they agree to put in, so much money per month into a joint account, and they use the joint account for their joint expenses like housing, groceries, vacations. If one earns a lot more money than the other, they would probably agree to have a proportional deposit into the joint account. In a premarital agreement, if you want to have your pensions remain separate property, that is not an effective agreement, because you can waive your rights in your spouse's pension only if you're a spouse. So if you waive it in a premarital agreement, you're not a spouse. So therefore, it's not an effective waiver in that particular area. Besides thinking about a budget, you want to understand that, your ownership of property. The general rules of marital property are that anything that you earn during marriage is community property, or anything you buy with earnings. Many people think that in a community property state, the minute you get married, everything is community property. That's just not true. Your separate property remains separate unless you do something to convert it to community property. And you can do that by a written agreement. Or in your premarital agreement, you can clarify that certain properties, either financial accounts or real estate, shall remain separate property, even if any payments are made with community property. So you want a clear understanding of what you're going to do with your earnings. If you want to think about having children, if you're planning to have children, you probably want one of the parents to stay home to take care of the child. So you want to think about, compensating that person for being out of their career for a period of time, which will give them a certain lesser level of earnings. So that's something to think about, is how to do that. And you also might want to think about adopting a parenting plan even before you have children, to what you will do just in case you separate during the minority of the children. Maybe you want to have in there that an acknowledgement that problems will arise, and that if you cannot solve the problems between just yourselves, that things are too difficult, you can write in your premarital agreement that you will go to a marriage counselor or a mediator, things like that. And you might want to talk about savings for retirement, or what kind of a lifestyle you want to have. Will you be taking vacations every year? Will you be investing any monies jointly or separately? And if so, what's your risk tolerance for investments? You want to be agreeable on that. You may want to have an emergency fund savings account. You might want to talk about charitable contributions and insurance, health insurance, life insurance. Maybe financial management altogether. You might want to hire a joint financial planner. And so you could either hire a professional or sit down and have a do-it-yourself financial plan. But that's something to think about, and maybe have in a written agreement before you get married. And here's the thing. After marriage, if things don't work out with any particular item that you've agreed to, you can rewrite your agreement. You can do a post-marital agreement. and that will be equally valid. The essential things about a written agreement are that you both sign it and it's dated. I had one couple that came in for mediation about financial issues. They wanted to stay married, but husband was extremely nervous about wife's what he thought was excessive spending. So we worked out an agreement where they had their money separate, and wife's debts, anything that she bought or charged, would be her separate debt. I advised them to have that agreement recorded with the county recorder. The purpose of recording it with the public recorder's office would be to officially put on notice all creditors that wife's debts were her separate debts, that they were not community debts, that husband would not be responsible. So just recording a document like that is official public notice to all creditors. So that if you got a money arrangement like that, you might want to have it recorded.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Judith, for giving the whole explanation. Your whole explanation have actually answered majority of the questions I had here. So I would just like to ask if you have any advice again you would like to give to possibly couples who want to go for this licensing or who might be having issue currently now.
Well, I would say the main thing is a good marriage relies on good communication.
Okay.
So best you start your patterns, your practice of communication before you get married, so you know that you can communicate together. It might happen that when you sit down to write a premarital agreement, you come to disagreements that reveal to you the impossibility of living with that other person. So you can call it off before you get into a legal relationship that could cause you a lot of trouble in the future.
Thank you so much.
Practice that's the time to learn if you can communicate. Oh, religion, that's another thing to talk about. Yeah, and how you feel about religion. And if you have children, will they be educated in a religious faith? You might want to talk about grandparents. Supposing one of the couples has parents that they're alienated from, you might want to talk about keeping your kids away from one set of adults that you think are toxic. All those things. Does that sound like something you'd want to go through before you get married?
Yes, actually, Mrs. Judith. I'm still very young, so I'm just trying my best to learn from what you are saying, so that probably if it gets to my time, I will also try my best to use these features. That's why I want to also personally thank you, Mrs. Judith, ma'am. And there's a question I normally ask Mrs. Judith, from the ancestors, from the forefathers, if there is anything you would like to bring back to our time today, what do you think that thing will be, ma'am?
Well, I think that people should know what their state law says about marriage and the consequences in regard to property and other legal obligations. It's interesting, I found it interesting to know that back in the days of the Roman Empire, the only people that bothered to get married and therefore did written contracts for people with property, because it was more of a property arrangement. And divorce in the Roman Empire days was very simple. The couple just told everybody, we're not living together anymore. And their dowry was returned to the wife's father, excuse me. They had dowries. So the wife's father gave this dowry to the married couple. But if they separated and it ended it, the money went back or whatever it was, went back to her father.
Hmm.
So, but we've complicated it took Christianity to complicate the whole process. Actually, marriage only became a recognized sacrament by the Catholic Church in the year 1206, when the Pope issued some declaration to some sect or another. But before that, it was more of a casual thing. I mean, it was still a church related issue,
Hmm.
but it was formally declared a sacrament in the year 1200.
Wow, I also learned from that from my church. That's very, very great. So I even thought marriage was something that has been existing since the time of Adam and Eve. I didn't know that it started from a place. I want to personally thank you so much, Mrs. Judith. You have a lot of experience, as in I learned a lot today. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time, for also having this interest to actually come to my show. Actually, thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. I enjoy this very much. And maybe next time we can talk about the American way of divorce.
Yes, yes. All right. Bye bye.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye. Have a good day.